the imposing red brick silhouette of Larundel Psychiatric Hospital looms against the darkening sky, like a festering wound on the outskirts of Bundoora in Victoria, Australia. This sprawling complex was once a place of refuge, but it slowly transformed into a warehouse for the forgotten and the damned. The wind that whistles through the shattered windows carries more than just the chill of the coming night, as it bears the phantom cries of those who lived and died within these walls. Local legends whisper that the madness treated here never truly left the premises, but instead seeped into the very mortar of the building. Visitors often report an immediate and crushing sense of dread the moment they step onto the overgrown grounds. Those who are brave enough to trespass past the rusted perimeter fences describe a heavy atmosphere that presses down on their chests and makes breathing difficult. It is a sensation similar to being submerged in deep water, where the pressure builds until it feels like your lungs might burst. The silence of the abandoned asylum is deceptive because it is frequently broken by inexplicable sounds that defy all rational explanation. Heavy footsteps echo down empty corridors where no living person walks, and doors slam shut with violent force in rooms that have been devoid of life for decades. The history of Larundel is not just written in the official records, but is etched into the peeling paint, and the claw marks found on the back of isolation cell doors. Larundel Psychiatric Hospital was not originally designed to house the mentally ill, but was constructed in 1938 to serve a very different purpose during a time of global conflict. The buildings were initially intended to be a mental hospital, but the outbreak of the Second World War saw the site repurposed as a training depot for the Women's Australian Auxiliary Air Force. Thousands of young women lived and trained in these buildings, and their energy seems to have lingered long before the darker chapter of the facility began. However, the transition from a military training ground to a psychiatric institution in 1953 marked the beginning of the true descent into darkness for this location. When the facility finally opened its doors as a mental health institution, it was hailed as a modern solution for patients suffering from acute psychiatric disorders and psychotic episodes. The architecture was grand, and the gardens were manicured to provide a sense of peace and order for the troubled minds residing within. Yet beneath this veneer of clinical efficiency lay a reality that was far more grim and unsettling for the patients. The treatment methods of the mid-20th century were often experimental and brutal by modern standards, involving heavy sedation and electroconvulsive therapy. Many patients were committed here against their will and stripped of their identities to become mere numbers in a bureaucratic system. The daily routine within Larundel was strictly regimented and designed to maintain total control over the unpredictable population housed in the secure wards. Nurses and orderlies moved through the halls with large rings of keys that jangled like jailers' chimes, echoing the lack of freedom for the residents. Patients diagnosed with schizophrenia and bipolar disorder were often subjected to high doses of lithium and other potent drugs that left them in a zombie-like state. The isolation rooms were frequently occupied by those who could not conform to the rigid rules, and their screams went unanswered in the dead of night. It is these moments of intense suffering and despair that have imprinted themselves onto the fabric of the building. As the years turned into decades, the shine of the new hospital wore off, and the facility began to suffer from overcrowding and underfunding. The ratio of staff to patients dwindled, and the quality of care plummeted, resulting in conditions that were described as deplorable by the time the 1980s arrived. The walls that once gleamed with fresh paint became stained with filth, and the beautiful gardens were allowed to grow wild and untamed. In this environment of neglect, the mental state of the patients deteriorated further, creating a feedback loop of misery. The negative energy generated during these years of decline is believed to be the primary fuel for the paranormal activity that plagues the site today. The closure of Larundel in the late 1990s was a slow and painful process that left the massive complex abandoned and vulnerable to vandals and the elements. When the last patient was finally transferred out and the heavy doors were locked for the final time, the building did not simply go to sleep. Instead, it seemed to wake up in a different way, as if the removal of the living allowed the dead to reclaim their territory. Urban explorers and thrill seekers soon began to infiltrate the site, drawn by the macabre allure of the empty asylum. They brought back stories of terrified encounters that spread like wildfire through the local community and cemented the reputation of Larundel as a haunted location. One of the most persistent and chilling legends associated with the abandoned hospital is the story of the little girl with the music box. Witnesses claim to hear the faint, tinny melody of a nursery rhyme drifting from the upper floors of the derelict buildings late at night. The sound is often accompanied by the soft padding of bare feet running across the wooden floorboards above. Some explorers have reported seeing a small, translucent figure in a white nightgown standing at the end of long, dark hallways. She reportedly stares silently at intruders before dissolving into the shadows, leaving behind a cold spot that chills the air to freezing temperatures. The lore suggests that this young spirit was a patient who died under tragic circumstances, perhaps forgotten in a seclusion room during a time of chaos. Her presence is not malevolent, but is overwhelmingly sad, evoking a feeling of profound grief in anyone who encounters her. People who have heard the music box melody often report feeling an inexplicable urge to weep, as if they are channeling the sorrow of the lost child. This emotional projection is a common phenomenon in Larundel, where the barrier between the past and present appears to be incredibly thin. The weeping of the girl is sometimes joined by the sobbing of adults echoing from the former wards, contrasting the sorrowful spirit of the girl is a far more aggressive and intimidating entity that is said to prowl the lower levels of the complex. This presence is distinctly male and exudes an aura of anger and violence that causes a physical reaction of nausea and fear. Witnesses describe hearing heavy boots stomping down the corridor, followed by the sound of something large being dragged across the floor. Some believe this spirit to be a former orderly who enjoyed his power over the patients a little too much in life. In death, he continues his rounds, ensuring that no one trespasses in his domain without feeling his wrath. There are terrifying accounts of explorers being physically shoved or scratched by invisible hands while navigating the darker sections of the ground floor. These attacks often leave red welts or distinct finger marks on the skin that fade only after the victim has left the hospital grounds. The aggression seems to be focused on young men in particular, perhaps triggering a memory of a past conflict within the mind of the spirit. This entity is known to slam doors shut to separate groups of explorers, isolating individuals in the darkness to maximize their terror. The feeling of being hunted is palpable and drives many people to flee the building in a blind panic. Another disturbing phenomenon frequently reported at Larundel is the phantom smell of hospital disinfectant mixed with stale tobacco smoke. This olfactory hallucination hits visitors suddenly and without warning, transporting them back to the days when the wards were active. The scent is often overpowering and can induce dizziness or headaches that persist long after leaving the area. It serves as a sensory reminder that the past is still very much alive within these walls. Alongside the chemical smells, there are occasional wafts of rotting food or unwashed bodies appearing in rooms that are completely empty and stripped of all debris. The graffiti that covers the interior walls of Larundel adds another layer of visual horror to the already grim environment. While much of it is modern vandalism, some messages seem to be inspired by the dark energy of the place. Scrawled warnings to turn back and depictions of twisted faces stare out from the peeling plaster, creating a gallery of nightmares. Some urban explorers claim that the graffiti changes overnight, with new symbols appearing in rooms that no one has accessed. Whether this is the work of other trespassers or something more supernatural remains a subject of heated debate among the paranormal community. Electronic voice phenomena, or EVP recordings captured at Larundel, are considered some of the most compelling evidence of its haunting. Investigators have recorded clear voices speaking in complete sentences, often responding directly to questions asked by the team. The voices range from the whispers of frightened patients to the stern commands of authority figures telling them to get out. One particularly famous recording captures a cacophony of voices, all talking over one another, creating a soundscape of confusion and madness. These audio anomalies suggest that the spirits are not just residual replays, but are conscious entities aware of the living people intruding on their space. The third floor of the main building is widely considered to be the epicenter of the paranormal activity and the most dangerous area to explore. The air on this level is consistently colder than the rest of the building, regardless of the weather conditions outside. It was on this floor that the most severe cases were housed and where the most intensive treatments took place. The energy here is thick and hostile, making it difficult to remain for more than a few minutes at a time. Batteries in cameras and flashlights are known to drain instantly on the third floor, leaving explorers stranded in total darkness. A specific room on the third floor is rumored to have been the site of a suicide and is avoided by even the most seasoned investigators. Those who enter this room report an intense sensation of vertigo and a sudden impulse to harm themselves. It is as if the dark thoughts of the former occupant are still trapped within the four walls, seeking a new mind to infect. This psychological impact is a hallmark of the Larundel haunting, where the danger is mental as well as physical. The room remains a black hole of negativity that swallows light and sound, leaving only a ringing silence. The expansive kitchen area, which once prepared meals for hundreds of patients and staff, is another hotspot for supernatural occurrences. The clattering of pots and pans is frequently heard echoing from the tiled room, even though the kitchen has been gutted for years. Shadows are seen darting between the rusted industrial ovens and the serving counters, moving with supernatural speed. Some witnesses have reported seeing the apparition of a woman in a kitchen uniform standing by the old stoves, continuing her eternal work. She appears solid for a fleeting moment before fading away like smoke in the wind. The sheer size of the complex means that there are countless corners and basements that have never been fully documented or explored. The underground tunnels that were used to transport laundry and supplies between buildings are particularly notorious. These subterranean passages are pitch black and prone to flooding, creating a claustrophobic nightmare for anyone foolish enough to enter. The tunnels are said to be the roaming grounds of shadow people, dark silhouettes that are darker than the surrounding blackness. They are often seen peering around corners or standing at the far end of a tunnel, blocking the path forward. One harrowing account from the late 2000s involves a group of 3 teenagers who decided to spend the night in the abandoned wards. They set up their sleeping bags in what they thought was a safe room on the 2nd floor, hoping to catch a glimpse of a ghost. Their night began quietly enough, with only the usual settling noises of the old building to keep them awake. However, around 3 in the morning, they were woken by the sound of a metal gurney being wheeled rapidly down the hallway outside their door. The squeaking of the rusted wheels grew louder and louder until it stopped directly in front of their room. Terrified and clutching their flashlights, the teenagers watched as the door handle began to turn slowly and deliberately. The door, which they had propped shut with a heavy piece of debris, pushed open with immense force, sending the debris skittering across the floor. Standing in the doorway was nothing but empty darkness, yet they all felt a malevolent gaze fixing upon them. A sudden blast of icy air swept into the room, extinguishing their lantern and plunging them into absolute blackness. In the confusion, they heard a guttural growl right next to their ears, whispering unintelligible threats that chilled them to the bone. Scrambling in the dark, the group managed to grab their gear and sprint out of the room, driven by pure adrenaline and terror. They ran blindly down the corridor, hearing the heavy footsteps of the pursuer close behind them, matching their pace. As they reached the stairwell, one of the teens felt a hand grab the back of his jacket, yanking him backward with violent force. He screamed and twisted away, tearing his jacket in the process, before tumbling down the stairs. They did not stop running until they had cleared the perimeter fence and were back under the safety of the streetlights. The aftermath of their encounter left a lasting mark on the group, as they all suffered from nightmares and sleep paralysis for weeks. The teen who was grabbed found a bruise on his back the next morning in the exact shape of a large handprint. They vowed never to return to Larundel, warning anyone who would listen that the spirits there are not to be trifled with. Their story became a cautionary tale, adding to the growing legend of the asylum and its hostile inhabitants. It serves as a reminder that these abandoned places are not playgrounds, but are active zones of paranormal energy. In recent years, parts of the Larundel site have been redeveloped into a residential housing estate known as Lancaster Gate. This controversial project involved demolishing some of the less significant buildings while renovating the heritage-listed structures into apartments. The idea of living in a former psychiatric hospital did not sit well with everyone, but the demand for housing was high. Developers assured potential buyers that the dark history was in the past and that the new community would be vibrant and peaceful. However, the transition from asylum to suburbia has not been seamless. Residents of the new development have reported a range of unsettling phenomena within their brand new homes. Objects go missing only to reappear in bizarre places. and electrical appliances turn on and off by themselves. Pets in the estate often stare at empty corners barking or hissing at something that their owners cannot see. Some families have reported waking up to find their furniture rearranged or kitchen cupboards wide open. It seems that the spirits of Larundel do not recognize the property lines or the new ownership deeds. The most disturbing reports from the new residents involve children interacting with invisible friends who they claim are former patients. Parents have listened with horror as their toddlers hold conversations with empty air laughing and playing games with unseen companions. When asked who they are talking to, the children describe people in funny clothes who look sad or sick. This generational bridge suggests that the entities are still seeking connection or perhaps comfort from the living. The innocence of children makes them open conduits for the supernatural, allowing the spirits to manifest more easily. Renovators working on the heritage buildings during the conversion process experienced their own share of inexplicable events. Tools would vanish from locked toolboxes, and heavy machinery would malfunction without any mechanical cause. Workers reported feeling cold hands touching their necks while they were working on ladders or scaffolding. Several contractors refused to work on the site after dark, claiming that the atmosphere became too oppressive to bear. The construction delays were often attributed to bad luck, but the workers knew that something else was at play. One construction worker reported seeing a face pressing against the glass of a window on the upper floor of a building that was completely gutted. The face was pale and gaunt with hollow eyes that followed him as he moved across the site. He went up to investigate, thinking it was a trespasser, but found the floor completely inaccessible due to missing staircases. There was no way for a living person to be up there. Yet, the image of the face was burned into his mind. He quit the job the following day, unable to shake the feeling of being watched. The skepticism of the general public often clashes with the lived experiences of those who have touched the darkness of Larundel. Skeptics argue that the sounds are just the wind and the sightings are merely pareidolia or the result of an overactive imagination. They point to the power of suggestion and the urban legends as the source of the fear rather than any genuine paranormal activity. However, for those who have felt the icy grip of the ghost or heard the phantom screams, the reality is undeniable. The physiological response to the haunting is visceral and cannot be easily dismissed. The concept of residual energy is the most common theory used to explain the haunting of Larundel Psychiatric Hospital. This theory suggests that traumatic events release a massive amount of emotional energy that gets absorbed by the environment, like a recording on a magnetic tape. This energy plays back over and over again when the conditions are right. This would explain the repetitive nature of some of the phenomena, such as the footsteps and the crying. It is a loop of history that is doomed to repeat itself for eternity. However, the interactive nature of some of the spirits suggests that there is also an intelligent haunting taking place. The entities that respond to EVP sessions or physical attacks demonstrate a level of awareness that goes beyond a simple recording. They are conscious of the present moment and react to the people who enter their domain. This mix of residual and intelligent haunting makes Larundel a complex and dangerous location for investigation. It is a chaotic intersection of past trauma and present fear. As the buildings of Larundel continue to be absorbed into the modern suburb of Lancaster Gate, the history becomes harder to see, but no less potent. The manicured lawns and modern facades hide the scars of the past, but they cannot erase the energy that lies beneath. The integration of the old asylum into the new community creates a surreal juxtaposition of life and death. Residents walk their dogs on paths where patients once shuffled in drug-induced hazes, unaware of the layers of history under their feet. The story of Larundel is a dark reflection of how society treats its most vulnerable members, both in life and in death. The abandonment of the facility was not just a physical act, but a symbolic one, discarding the people and the memories that were too painful to confront. The ghosts that remain are a testament to this neglect, refusing to be forgotten or swept aside. They demand acknowledgement of their suffering and their existence in a world that wants to move on. For the urban explorers who documented the decay before the renovation, their photos serve as a vital record of the truth. These images capture the raw and unfiltered reality of the asylum, showing the peeling paint and the rusted bars. They stand as a visual eulogy for the institution and the souls that were trapped within its walls. The photos preserve the atmosphere of dread and melancholy that defined Larundel for so many years. They are a window into a world that has largely vanished from sight. The allure of Larundel Psychiatric Hospital lies in its ability to terrify and fascinate in equal measure. It is a place where the veil between worlds is shredded and the impossible becomes possible. The stories of the ghost girl, the angry orderly, and the phantom patients are modern folklore that keeps the memory of the site alive. They serve as a warning that some places are best left undisturbed, and that the past has a way of clawing its way back into the present. As night falls over Bundora, and the lights of the new houses flicker on the shadows of the old asylum, still lengthen and deepen. The wind still carries the faint echoes of the music box, and the feeling of being watched remains as potent as ever. The transformation of the site has not exorcised the demons, but merely given them a new audience to torment. The legacy of Larundel is one of enduring darkness, a stain on the landscape that no amount of renovation can ever fully scrub away. The final truth of Larundel is that it is a monument to the resilience of the human spirit, even in its most twisted and broken forms. The energy that remains is a testament to the intensity of the lives lived there and the tragedy of their endings. Whether one believes in ghosts or not, the psychological weight of the place is undeniable and leaves a scar on all who visit. It stands as a grim reminder that brick and mortar can hold memories just as tightly as the human mind. In the end, the only way to truly escape the grip of Larundel is to never enter its gates in the first place. For those who have already trespassed the memories of what they saw and felt will linger long after they have returned to the safety of their homes. The darkness of the asylum is not something that can be easily shaken off like dust from a coat. It burrows deep into the subconscious, waiting for the quiet moments of the night to resurface and remind you that you are never truly alone. The screaming silence of the empty wards continues to echo in the minds of those who witnessed it, a haunting melody that never resolves. The faceless figures in the windows still stand watch over their domain, eternal guardians of a kingdom of sorrow. Larundel remains a scar on the history of Victoria, a place where the darkness is not just an absence of light, but a living, breathing presence. It waits patiently for the next curious soul to step across the threshold and join its eternal collection of stories. So if you ever find yourself walking near the old grounds of Larundel and you hear the faint tinkling of a music box, do not stop to listen. Turn around and walk away as fast as you can, for the spirits of the asylum are lonely, and they are always looking for new playmates. The line between the living and the dead is nowhere thinner than here, and once you cross it, there may be no way back. The darkness of Larundel is hungry, and it never sleeps.